Hey everybody, I'm Anna McEwen. And now for Bob Switzer with the epic narrative.
Always a pleasure to be here with you. Seriously, I love technology. As you know, I get nervous around it. And so for the last 15 seconds, I couldn't figure out why my microphone wasn't on. I was like, man, I did everything right. And then it was like, no, check your connectors, Bob. So click. Of course, I checked the wrong one last, and boom, plugged it in, and there it is. My microphone turns green. Yay, Bob, figured it out. Be nice if engineer Bob could take care of this for me and just know all the technological stuff and just come in and set everything up and say, hey, Bob, just talk, because that's pretty much your gift. People often will ask me, like, so what'd you do for a living? And it's like, I talk. And I honestly love what I do. I love being a pastor. I love walking with people. I love being part of the journey. There's just no way around that. I love it. But as we discovered, excuse me, I swallowed hard. As we discovered a year ago when we were doing the book of Exodus, it is very difficult for me to like list skills that I have. I just don't have a lot, because that's not what I got paid to do. I got paid to talk, shepherd, love, teach, mentor, all that stuff. And it sounds great until you want a job. And then they're like, yeah, well, whatever. All right. On with the show. Currently. Oh yeah. What am I doing currently? At the time of this recording, I'm still working at a campground in the Florida Keys. So every day I wake up in paradise. It's awesome. And currently my main job is working in the cafe. So I make sandwiches and coffee and lots of French fries and chicken fingers. And one day a week I work in housekeeping. So that's fun. Anyways, on with the show. Today, we're going to try and do 2 chapters. Bob's like, what? We'll be done in this whole book in a week. No, we won't. And remember, Bob, we're trying to do 3 books of the law in this season. And we will, because there's these sort of things. We're not breaking down every minute detail of each sacrifice. We're finding the narrative, the story behind these sacrifices. What was the point of having all these details? And for a lot of people, the point is, well, because if you break the details, then you've sinned. And if you sin, God's going to kill you. So now that we're, it's like, now that we're in church, let me remind you of all the ways that you've sinned this week. So you should just be thankful God hasn't killed you yet. That's often kind of the attitude that a lot of preachers have when they're up front, right? And when they're going through the books of the law, it's like, we're going to remember every week just how much we don't make it. What was it? What was that prayer? Where that unfortunate chain of words where the preacher got up and said, Lord, please forgive us for our falling shorts. And of course, it's hard to keep a straight face at that point. But he didn't realize what he said, It is tough when your shorts do start falling, though. It's you got problems. Anyways, here we're going to look at, these are the sin offerings. We're in Leviticus chapters 4 and 5. Chapters 4 and 5 of the book of Leviticus. So generally speaking, we're looking at 4 types of sin offerings. There's 2 big ones, all right, or 2 main, I shouldn't say big ones. There are 2 main categories: unintentional and intentional. Easy distinction, right? And then there's the 4 detailed things that they go through are the ones for leadership and /rulers and /rich people. and one's for common folk and poor folk. The common people, the poor people. I don't know where the word folk came from, but there you go. It's now recorded forever on the Epic Narrative Podcast. And then it's the same for the intentional sin or active sin. You have a whole detailed thing for rulers, leadership, and the rich, and another whole detailed thing for the common people and for the poor people. But all throughout the details, what we pick up is this: leaders hold a position. Oh, this is tough. I mean, not tough, but this is awesome, right? Leaders hold a position that is responsible for the sin of those that they lead. So, so being in leadership meant that you carried a level of responsibility for the decisions and choices of those that you were overseeing. So I'm thinking now, what would happen if you were in charge of a church and that was true? See, most pastors would, not most, I don't know how many. Let me just say, there are some pastors. There you go. That's a much nicer way of putting it, Bob. You're not so aggressive. Stop being so aggressive. Be nice. There are some pastors that would look at that and say, I do take responsibility for their spiritual decisions, which is why I tell them all the times that they're wrong so they can make better decisions. That's not helpful. We have hundreds of years of that kind of philosophy, and the poor decisions continue to be made. Why? Because you focus everyone on making bad decisions. And what happens in the principles of the kingdom that were established in the creation, also mentioned in season 2 of the Epic Narrative. What you focus on, you become. And if you're going to focus on being a sinner and all the things you've done wrong, guess what you constantly do? You sin and do things wrong. It's inevitable. But a lot of preachers make a good living doing that, and they're quite entertaining as far as they're concerned. They're scary to me. Like when I listen to them, I think, oh my word. Whoa. That's some scary stuff. But that was to me, it was interesting, right? And then I apply that to people who own their own businesses, people who oversee their households, right? How many parents, whether single mom, single dad, parenting together, whatever, how many actually take responsibility for the decisions that are made by their children, and how many don't? Like, how many throw up their hands and say, well, I mean, it starts when they're 2, right? Oh, terrible 2s. Oh, terrible 3s. Toddlers. Oh, they're toddlers. Oh, well, she's 10 years old. She thinks she's 30. Oh, preteens. Oh, middle schoolers. Oh, well, they're teenagers. What are you going to do? No, like, that's not taking responsibility. And just pointing out what they did incorrect. I'm not saying they were all sinners. I'm not saying that. But just pointing out what they were, what they did that was incorrect is not taking responsibility. That's no. But you can apply it to government as well. Most people in government do not take responsibility for the people that they oversee. They have taken it upon themselves to control the people that they oversee. Thereby, that's how they would probably define it as being responsible. I'm responsible for the decisions you make, so I must control every aspect of your world so that you always make the right decision. And if you don't, then you will lose privileges. That's not taking responsibility. The responsibility was to teach the people and teach them so well that the people would never unintentionally break the law and sin. That was the way that they took responsibility. If you were in charge of a tribe, if you were in charge of the family, if you were in charge of, if you were an elder and in essence oversaw the nation, you had a responsibility to teach and interact with them, not just to break down the rules on how to do a sacrifice for sin. That's not teaching responsibility. That's logistics. Your role as a leader was to bring people into relational connection to their creator who loves them, so that they behave like like the creator who made them. Like, that's the whole point of interacting with God. That's the whole point of worship and prayer. It's the idea that the thing that you focus on, you become. The thing you interact with, you become like. God wanted that kind of interaction. So yeah, the sacrificial system is nothing new. There's hundreds of sacrificial systems in the world at this time, but this sacrificial system had with it a different principle, because it was not about trying to keep the God above you or the God that you worship from killing you. It was about connecting to the God who created you so that you would become like him. Oh man, what a difference it makes when you approach the law with this filter. When you understand what God was trying to do, it changes things. And trust me, it brings life. It brings life to these verses. I have conversations with people often around the goodness of God, and I know that we've dealt with this before, right? The goodness of God can be very offensive to people. It's offensive because it's not sorry, I'm swallowing a lot, aren't I? You're probably hearing that. I sometimes have to remember that people have, earbuds in when they're listening. It gets super intense. Like, Bob swallowed a lot today. All right. My producer will tell me, he'll send me a little text, like after a couple weeks of swallowing too much. He'll be like, "Hey, Bob, why don't you pull the microphone away?" Thank you, Brian. I'll do that. All right. Oh man, did I completely lose my train of thought? The responsibility of teaching and interacting so people don't unintentionally do it is not about the logistics of performance, i.e. the logistics of bringing the offering. The responsibility of leadership is to build such a highly interactive relationship between you and your creator that you don't have to bring an offering. Yeah. How's that? And that's one of the reasons why, when it came to doing an offering for the wealthy, for the rich, for the leadership, the sacrifice, the offering was to cost them. This was an offering that you should invest in. Remember last week we talked about the offering. It was just so simple, so quick, just boom, boom, boom. We can make this happen. 3 very simple ingredients. This one here is big. This one involves, for the wealthy, it involves large animals. And when you bring them, this offering is going to be fully consumed. Nobody gets benefit from this. And prior to burning it, you present it to everybody that's hanging out in front of the tent of meeting, which isn't just the people that are bringing sacrifice. Of course, there's people who are just there to hang out and watch what's going on. It's kind of where everything's going on every day. Now, the details of each offering, okay, if you read chapter 4, and most of chapter 5, the details of each offering needs to be followed. That's right, Bob. The details need to be followed because God is a God of order, and order must be followed or all hell breaks loose. That's not what they said. Sorry. But there are people who have that attitude, right? You need to follow the rules. Follow the rules. Is that a type A personality, Bob? Do you remember? Do you think so? There are those that are just intuitively wired to follow the rules. They're not wrong. They're just wired differently, and we all need each other. All right. Sorry, I was about to run down a whole other path. I better stay focused. We might actually not get through these 2 chapters. All right. The details of the offering need to be followed, not for God's sake. But God wrote the details. Yeah. Why did he write those details? Why Why would he want all of those detailed follows? Because you don't need the details. He could have just said, listen, if you're wealthy and in leadership and you intentionally or unintentionally sinned, bring a really big bull and we'll kill it. Everything will be fine. Because he could have just demanded, in essence, payment. He didn't. He gave all these details. Why? Because he wanted the person who brought the offering to be confident that what they brought took care of the problem. This is a beautiful thing about God. He always wants you to come to him confidently. He doesn't ever want you to come wondering, Jiminy crickets, is he going to be mad at me today? What if he's mad at me today? I mean, I know I did what I know, I did what was right, but no, he's like, no, I want you to come confidently. So here are some crazy specific things, not because I need them done this way, but so that when you're done doing it, you can walk away going, yes, my offering was enough. God put this whole system in place in order to help people be confident that they had a secure connection to God. You know, one of the things that I just loathe about so many, not many, I should be nicer, okay, about a number of churches, some churches, I just loathe it, is when they take people's confidence away from connecting to God. They make it seem as though there's maybe one more thing that could be done, maybe a thought, maybe that thought that you didn't know you had, that you almost had, maybe that was, maybe God's going to come after you. Like, they just constantly beat down or cut off your confidence in connecting to God. And God's like, he puts all these details in place so that your confidence is not shaken. He wants you to be confident. The details build that confidence. No details would have left, right? If no details were written down, that would have left everything up to men. And when you lead religious, when you lead religious tradition and connection and logistics up to, that's what I wanted really. I was messing around until I found the word. Religious logistics up to man, it's going to get crazy. It'll go sideways really fast. And ultimately, if you go through, again, I know I mentioned this before, if you go through anthropology, right, and there's all these systems of sacrifice and offerings all throughout history, eventually, when man is in charge, it ultimately leads to a human sacrifice. It leads to someone dying or lots of your enemies dying or whatever. I mean, that whole movie, if you've ever seen it, it's old. It's called Apocalypto. Mel Gibson wrote it, directed it, or something. Anyways, it was fascinating. But it opens up in a scene that, according to archaeologists, they're pretty confident it occurred in that there was a time in which I believe it was the Aztecs sacrificed like over 8,000 people. Maybe it was 80,000. Anyways, it was a ridiculous amount of dead bodies, headless bodies, just, oh my word. Anyways, they were all their enemies. They just sacrificed all their enemies, and in hopes that the God that they served would be satisfied and they could approach the God with confidence. And this God, our God, is saying, hey, you follow these rules, you can be confident. I don't need the rules. You need the rules. Or because if I left it up to you, you'd come up with something that was crazy. I don't want crazy. Specific, I'll do specific because specifics bring you confidence. I'm not going to do crazy. But because the details also bring boundaries on what's required. And you can't, the rich people can't bring more and show off and become prideful in their religious, exercises. And the poor can't be told, well, that's not enough. You didn't bring enough. You got to bring more. You got to have more. Because those are the two things that religion does, right? Religion and pride get all kind of control happy. And they got people wearing things and doing things and bringing things that are completely, it's out of control. It's out of control. And there are churches that honestly are out of control. You've got ministry leaders that are out of control with the amount of control and arrogance that they have on people's lives. And what's so sad, right? So sad. I mean, currently there's the most recent at the time of this recording, the most recent, involved a worldwide ministry. And it was built on the backs of young, passionate, idealistic worshipers of God, and they were told, and the culture told them to give up more, and they did. Man, these beautiful, amazing people, some of them for years, 20 plus years, sacrificed like you can't. I honestly, it's amazing what they did, and they built that ministry, and it was huge. But at the top of the ministry was somebody who probably knew exactly what he was doing. And he took advantage of young, passionate believers who were willing to give it all for the name of the Lord to be moved on. And they were, manipulated, controlled. What do they call it? Clergy abuse, whatever. And I'm sure there'll be more after this recording is heard. And so I don't want to necessarily give you the name of it, but you probably won't have to think hard to come up with one that does it. But it doesn't have to be a worldwide ministry. It could be a church down the street. It could be 25 people in a church. And I have spoken with people who have had their lives controlled with less than 12 people going to the church. I literally witnessed and walked through a young lady whose husband was divorcing her. They had just had a child. Her husband was divorcing her because the man of God of the church told him that's what God wanted him to do, that there was another woman for him somewhere coming, and he needed to get rid of the one. He married the wrong woman. That level of control, there couldn't have been more than 12 people going to that church. It has nothing to do with the size. It has to do with the heart of leadership. And all God's doing in the logistics of this particular offering is this. He's saying, hey, you got to bring something that's going to cost you something, because I need you, wrong word. I want you to remember that your role is not one of logistical pride and religious arrogance. It's one of leadership and responsibility. It's one where you have a responsibility to teach about the connection and relationship with God that's available to everyone. And I want them to come confidently. So I don't want you adding things to this. I don't want you throwing things out. I don't want you to be like, well, the Lord told me, that he's going to change this, which is exactly what happened later in life, right? Religious leaders eventually added so many extra requirements to these. They added sins that you could commit. They added all kinds of details to sacrifices that weren't there in the original, but that God had told them. And in the end, they added doubt to the lives of those who were just trying to get right with God. They just wanted to approach God in confidence. And religion will steal that from you. God's heart has never changed. Never changed. We've talked about this. When it comes to covenant, God has been good all through time. And the life of the Bible is talking all about the amazing God who wants to connect with people. Now, when you go to chapter 5, if you read it, and I'm not reading it, as you know, there's a lot of this word "if" in there, okay? Like verse 1, if anyone sins because they do not speak up when they hear public charge testify, regarding someone they have seen or learned about, and they will be held responsible. Verse 2, if anyone becomes aware that they are guilty, if they unwittingly touch anything, ceremonially clean, or verse 3, or if they touch human uncleanness. Verse 4, or if anyone thoughtlessly takes an oath to do anything. This is what I want you to understand in the language. That word if is the idea of when. So here's the thing. So many times religious leaders will look at those phrases, right? They're not going to do the work of breaking it down because the word if fits their narrative. They can say, hey, if you do this, God's going to get you. If you do this, you have sinned. If you do this, it's over for you. If you do this. And God's like, no. I'm saying when these things, I know you're going to trip up. That's what he's saying. When you do this, when you touch unclean bodies, when you touch, it's like he's letting people know, listen, I know you're going to live life. And I know you may do things that are going to kind of throw you off spiritually. It's okay. The idea of bringing a sin offering for unintentional sins that you might have committed is the whole idea that, listen, I want your heart to stay soft, so that if and when an intentional sin occurs, you'll be quick to come restore connection. He's not laying this on thick, saying, hey, if you do this, you've crossed the line, you will die. If you do this and you don't bring the offering, you will die. If he's like, listen, I know you're going to do this. It's okay. So I want you to bring offerings for unintentional sin, because you're going to grow and mature, and you're going to look back and go, oh my goodness, I had no idea I had sinned way back then. Well, that's what that offering was for, because I want you to be in a pattern of restoring connection to your Creator. I want it to be easy. I want it to be quick, so that when you do it intentionally, you don't look at it and go, oh man, this is going to hurt. This offering's going to hurt. God is going to be so mad. God's like, no, just come, bring it. Let's get this connection going. It's a beautiful thing. All right. So the sin offering goes through, I think it's verse 14. And then it's called the guilt offering, verses 14 through 19. The Lord says to Moses, when anyone is unfaithful to the Lord by sinning unintentionally in regard to any of the Lord's holy things, and these are things that the Lord has a penalty of a ram from the flock, one without defect and as proper value, silver, according to the sanctuary shekel. It is the guilt offering. They must make restitution for what they have failed to do in regard to the holy things, pay an additional penalty of a fifth of its value, and give all of it to the priest. The priest will make atonement for them and the ram as a guilt offering, and they will be forgiven. If anyone sins and does what is forgiven, if any of the Lord's commands, even though they do not know it, they are guilty and will be held responsible. They are to bring to the priest as a guilt offering a ram from the flock, one without defect or of proper value, and in this way the priest can make atonement for them. What they have done is wrong and have committed unintentionally, and they will be forgiven. It is a guilt offering. They have been guilty of wrongdoing against the Lord. All right. Then Bob, what about, I thought you said God didn't use guilt. I thought, Bob. Okay. Listen. Here we go. Guilt offering. It is not about sin. Now listen. It's not about, quote, missing the mark. This is doing something that is a misuse of, or being unsure if what was done was sinful. See, this is not guilt from God to you. This is you feeling guilty about something and you're not sure if it broke a principle of heaven. See, this is God curing, or giving you, I shouldn't say curing, giving you a way to do battle against one of the biggest weapons that the enemy has. He says, like, listen, if you're feeling guilty, then this is what you do. This is what you do. You figure this out. You bring a guilt offering. You bring it so that you're sure. And then if later you find out it was a sin and there's a specific offering for that, then let's take care of that. But God is making this relationship quick to maintain and be with him, to alleviate sin and guilt, and then to elevate your spiritual plane, your spiritual being. He's like, I don't want you walking around feeling guilty. You feel guilty? Bring a guilt sacrifice. Let's get it over with. Guilt is one of the heinous things that the enemy does. Just get it done. Get rid of it. Let's move on. Honestly, this is a beautiful little detail that the Lord puts into his offering system. Because he's like, listen, if you feel guilty, if you're unsure, let's clean that up. Let's get that out of your life. All right. 2 chapters. We done it. And I don't know if you heard it or not, but the AC unit just kicked on. And so you may have heard like a wind tunnel effect going on in the background. But you may not have, because Brian is so good at what he does. He may have just whooshed it all away, which is awesome, because he's awesome. Anyway, folks, I will see you next week on the Epic Narrative. We will continue to find the story behind all the details, because that's what we do here. We tell stories. Have yourself a good day. See you next week.
Don't go anywhere. We've got Bob Thoughts.
All right. Well, I think I start a lot of things with that phrase, all right, don't I? I probably need to find a new phrase. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit more about, just briefly about that whole idea of people in leadership bringing on more judgment to themselves. We, in James, it says something to the effect, I wish that not all of you would want to be teachers because you incur greater judgment. Now remember, when it comes to judgment and God, that has to do with exposure. Judgment is about laying things out so that it can be evaluated. And what isn't love in what's being evaluated, then you replace what isn't love with love, and you become more loving. So God's judgment is all about love. It makes you more loving. It makes you more like him because he is love. That's what his judgment is. It's not punitive. It's not the idea of punishment, of I'm going to expose something, embarrass you, shame you, guilt you, and then through that just force you into compliance. Like, that's not how God works. That's not how love works. It's not how it should work anyways. A lot of times, unfortunately, people have been in very abusive, loving relationships, and that's what happens, right? They're embarrassed, they're shamed, they're manipulated. None of that has to do with God's love. None of that has to do with God's judgment. God's judgment is, hey, let's take a look at this and let's make it even more loving. That's what occurs to the leaders when it comes to being in leadership. God's like, when you're in leadership, more stuff gets exposed because you're in leadership. The spotlight is on you. The more people are watching you, more eyeballs are on you. And I know that happens, a lot of times. I was a pastor for years. I'd love to be a pastor again. And, if you know any job opportunities, let me know. At the time of this recording, anyways. I'd love to. Sorry, got distracted, started running down that road. Bob, this is not a job application. This is your thoughts. Okay, so on with my thoughts. So a lot of times pastors would be like, listen, I'm just like you. Your pastor's got problems. Your pastor has issues. Don't worry about me. Just worry about you. God's like, that's not how it works. You can't try to hide if you're in leadership. Don't. It's just part of the job. And part of the job is you have to allow yourself to be in alignment with love. And when you're judged, it's just an opportunity to become more loving. And I think for those who look at God's judgment and think, oh, it was like fire, it burned me. Oh, it was so overwhelming. It's like, yeah, well, when you're not in flow with love to begin with, and you have an encounter with love, yeah, it's like running. It definitely could be like very dramatic. But it's not designed to hurt you. It's designed to bring you into alignment with more love. That's all. Because love is always looking out for your best interest. Always. Always, always. And I think here, I probably didn't, I don't know. When I listened to today's episode, I thought I probably used too many words to try and say that concept. And so I wanted to just touch on it again here and hopefully bring a little more concise concept there, that the peace offering for the leaders was, hey, I want you to know that where your role means you have more light on you. And I want you to feel that. I want you to understand that. I don't want you to walk around and say, and pretend, or not pretend, I shouldn't say that. Not be self-aware that you're in a role of leadership, and your role is not to tell people what to do, but to instruct them in the ways of love. And by instructing them, if you fail in that, you bear some responsibility because you're in charge. They're looking to you. And if you don't take that role seriously, I want to remind you of that. When you bring your offering, I want you to be reminded, like, you have a heavier price to pay. And it's okay. It's not a punishment. It's just an awareness, a self-awareness. Man, there are a lot of leaders that could be more self-aware. I'll tell you that right now. But we're not gonna dwell there. Everyone, I hope you have a fabulous day. I'll see you next week on The Epic Narrative.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to this podcast on any platform you use. You can also reach out to Bob for questions or booking at thebobswitzer.com or email him at thebobswitzer@gmail.com. See you next week, guys.